Kia ora, everyone. Welcome to the session on critical experiments. My name is William Godsoe, and normally I'm a senior lecturer in the Bioprotection Research Center in New Zealand, which means it's currently 9 o'clock at night here. Today, as part of the session, I've put together a presentation on what's been done through the Critical Experiments group. This includes some factual information, a little bit of storytelling, and then some opportunities for discussion to go forward. So I'm going to start right now by sharing the PowerPoint presentation. So this incubator was set up. Oh, actually, let me put this in full view like this. Everyone can see my beautiful PowerPoint slides like this?
Yes. Okay,
great. So this group was set up at the in-person GYA in Halle 2 years ago. It's been coordinated by myself and Anna Harris. We've had a number of members here, including some of whom are in this meeting right now. And the things that we've put together wouldn't have been possible without the help of Candida Sanchez Burmester, who has been doing a lot of the organizational work as well. Okay, so in this session, I've put together a couple of slides on what we've done. I expect they'll take 10 or 15 minutes, but I will try to read the audience as well as I can to figure out how much time to do. I'll start by talking a little bit about the original plan that we've had. That original plan included a survey of GYA members, and I'm going to put up some of the results of that. I have then been experimenting with showing videos from GYA members as a supplement. We might have a think as a group about whether we want to see more of those videos right now or engage in a discussion as a group. And then the final part will be an opportunity for discussion. Okay. I'm going to start by talking a little bit about what I expected to come from this group. So I am an ecologist, which means that in principle, a lot of what I try to do is understand how organisms work in nature. But to do that, I'm constantly frustrated with the limitations that are placed on ecologists when they have to do experiments. So the photo right here is a photo of a group of organisms I work on. This is a curly dock, which is an invasive species in New Zealand. This is from an experiment that a colleague of mine, Angela Brandt, did. And when we do experiments in ecology, they always feel completely artificial. So here, there are a couple of plants growing in a pot. The red tags are one type of plant, and the blue tags are another type of plant. And this is one of the things that I've worried about throughout my entire career. And a lot of what I've tried to do is to find methods that I can pull from mathematics to try to clarify what exactly people should be measuring in the experiments. When I got to the GYA and got to meet people in person in Halle, you just get struck by how many other people might potentially have alternative approaches and alternative insights to try to set up experiments and come up with things that ecologists may have not thought about together. And so for me, what I got really excited about was the idea of an excuse to pick other people's brains about what they see as experiments in their fields and what I and others might be able to learn from them. And so we set up a working group to do experiments at the Halle session, I guess I should say an incubator, and had it as sort of a thing where at the next in-person GYA, we could use this as an excuse to come together and chat with people and pick each other's brains. That was the initial plan, but of course, what we thought was a working group on experiments ended up being an experiment on our own version of sensory deprivation. And the entire last year or two has been very unprecedented in terms of the difficulties that we've come up with. I think that things have been relatively simple for us, but that still meant things like being stuck on completely different continents. I think I look a little bit more perky right now than I did here, but very different time zones and a lot of difficulty in coordinating. And so that original plan has sort of been scrapped. And instead, what I'm going to talk about is two alternative things that we've managed to put into our project. So to get the project started during the 2019 AGM, we put together a small survey to put at the small dinner. I think this was a way for us to get conversation starters for ideas that people might have about what experiments mean to them and what we could learn from how people do experiments. So in the survey, we put in 4 questions. What's your discipline and what kind of experimental methods does it use? We wanted to get a feel for where people were coming from for the subsequent questions. We asked people, what kinds of experiments do you do? What do you see as the limits of your experimental methods? And what can you do to overcome these limitations? Looking at the survey, we had a number of people from various disciplines, which is not that surprising for the AGM. We got lots of detailed answers for experiments, and I will try to get video of some people explaining their experiments in more depth. And I'll just talk a little bit about the last 2 questions. So what are limitations and what do you do to overcome these? So if we think about limitations for experiments, the most obvious thing to me that came out of this survey is that some limitations completely transcend disciplines. And I'm going to give you a few examples of answers that we got. Money. They'd have to be large and so are expensive. Lack of required equipment and lab chemicals. Bank account balance, which there were a number of other answers like this. This was not at all what I at least was expecting in the survey, but I mean, in some ways it really makes sense that what counts as an experiment in many disciplines is extraordinarily expensive, and for GYA members in particular, and arguably for science and research in general, the financial limitations that we have in experiments can be severe and really affect the kind of works that we do. There were also this result about financial resources surprised me a little bit, and I think it's worth emphasizing as sort of like maybe a bare fact and one that's very important in the current situation in the world. It's one that I don't think there are simple answers to, but we can certainly discuss this when we get to the open discussion portion of the event. A second set of limitations that we could see are things where another set of limitations that were real, but which there may actually be opportunities to remedy through connections with other GYA members. So some limitations concern limited skill sets of researchers. So best practices of statistics are not known or ill-defined. That can be a matter of digging into the stats for a project. Privacy issues and how those are managed can be very important for experiments in some disciplines. Same thing with consent and asymmetries versus experimental subjects that are in high income settings versus low income settings. Limitations of measuring instruments, and the fact that experts in some fields have attitudes that can make experiments more difficult. So some experts don't like to be concrete on sensitive topics. Okay, so those are the limitations. In terms of ways to overcome those limitations, we got a number of answers from people. And there are things that I would have loved a chance to pick people's brains about in person. But as it was a little bit hard to tell. Many of the ways to overcome limitations that we got in the survey seemed to be pretty discipline specific. So concepts like reflexivity, Fab Lab, inventing new catalysts, new molecular genomic-based methods, new quantitative tools. All those sounded amazing, but because we just had the survey, we didn't get a chance to sort of tease those apart. So every once in a while, Anna, my co-lead, would talk about reflexivity, which can be big in anthropology and some of the humanities. And as a scientist, I kind of feel like I get it, but there's more I have to pick her brain about. And one of us has always been half asleep when we've been chatting with each other, and I haven't had a chance to do that. Some ways to overcome limitations are more transdisciplinary, and those can include let my students do the problem and get more work that way as well. Okay. Once we realized that the survey was a lot of what we were going to get in terms of direct interactions with GYA members, we decided that as a stopgap, we would solicit videos from GYA members to try to get them to describe what experiments meant to them and what the limitations that they would get would be. And we are very grateful that we got about a dozen videos from GYA members and are in the process of putting those together into something a little bit more coherent, and are very sad we couldn't follow up with people in person. I am going to check my time right now, which is 9:10. And I'm going to try to exit PowerPoint and show you a couple of the videos that we got, which seem sort of lovely, thoughtful descriptions of experiments and what they meant for some of the people. So I'm stopping the screen share right here, like this. And then, doing a quick battle with Zoom to get to, to try to get my computer to get to another thing. You will have to bear with me for 1 minute. Share screen. Here we go. Okay, so I'm going to play a couple of these right now. In a second, share screen, shared with computer sound. Starting with Rob Lepinus's incredible TikTok video. If it will play.
Experiments are awesome in science, but should governments use experiments? Increasingly, that's done all around the world. Policy, done like science. Some of my research deals with that kind of stuff. Some people approach policymakers and claim that their policies would be much better if implemented because they have this experimental and thus scientific basis. So I study their claims about this. You've probably heard about nudging, which is closely related. But who decides which societal issues should be settled with experiments and which ones shouldn't?
Okay. I'm checking, and people were able to hear, not just see the view, the beautiful visuals that that Rob put in there. There would be an argument for doing coherent, like a coherent full discussion of what Rob is saying in a theoretical context. But I just want to say, I would really love a chance to pick Rob's brain about that more. So it's very common, especially when I talk with other scientists, to like just focus in on a single narrow issue of how do I get the stuff to do my next experiment. And what was great in that video is how much Rob talks about how there's an experiment, but what you have for the experiment then has this bigger context that you have to think about more carefully. Okay, now let's see if I can do battle and pull up a couple more of those videos. All right, next I'm going to try to play Nova's video.
Good morning, I'm Nova Ahmed from Bangladesh. I'm a member of Global Young Academy and here at National Young Academy of Bangladesh, and executive committee member in both of them. And
please minimize the file explorer. We don't see the video.
Oh dear, thank you. Let me try stop share. Thank you. Okay. Share screen. Critical experiments. I'm going to try once more. Is that better, Jonas? Can you hear? Nope. Okay. I'm going to try once more. And if it doesn't work, you may just have to have my apologies for this, and then move to the next thing. Windows Media Player.
National Young.
Okay.
Good morning. I'm Nova Ahmed from Bangladesh. I'm a member of Global Young Academy and here at National Young Academy of Bangladesh, and executive committee member in both of them. And I wanted to talk about my experience with experiments as a computer scientist living in Bangladesh. I work with sensors, systems, and I also work closely with humans through human-centered computing. And some of the challenges we faced were related to living in Bangladesh. Sensors are not available. We don't get very expensive, fancy things. The local market is full of low-cost alternatives, and I try to work with them. So, for example, compared to the expensive Fitbit, we developed our own version that is very low cost, that will just look at the irregularities, stress, a basic level of variability. But the problem is with the international community, their acceptance. We have to go through a rigorous process, and often they are skeptical. I wish scientists are more open to accept new ideas or alternative ideas as opposed to the traditional ones. Other things we have to face are related to the policy level challenges, like we do not have very good data protection policy, privacy policies. So when we work with human, we always have to be extra cautious so that we are not hampering any of those. It's not like we have built-in policies like European countries have. So, but again, I believe that through collaboration and cooperation, we can make it a better place. We can have more openness. And yes, thank you very much. Bye.
Okay. So that was Nova's, which I think is totally different from what Rob talks about, but also talks about like real material, serious issues to think about. And one of the things that she brings up that I think is worthwhile is that there's both an issue of the difficulty in obtaining particular kinds of equipment, but there's also sort of this issue of other scientists, and like getting money is always going to be a difficult issue, but there is maybe more room to get leeway on terms of like other scientists' acceptance for different kinds of technology. Now, I'm going to try to pull up one more video. Let me just see if I can do this, which is Lisa Herzog's. I'm going to pull up Lisa Herzog's video, which was done several months ago at the beginning of the year, but I think actually is almost prophetic. Now, okay, now I'm going to do the share screen once more. I'll leave it up to Jonas to keep me honest.
Hello, my name is Lisa. I'm a political philosopher from Germany, currently working in the Netherlands. And in philosophy, we don't have experiments as in lab sciences, but we use thought experiments quite a lot. And the aim is to imagine things to be differently in order to learn something about the world, to think about the concepts we use and how they might be used differently, or to think about what would be a more ethical, a more just version of our world in order to understand what kinds of reforms could make our world better. And one very interesting such, if you like, thought experiment was a working group I was recently involved with during the Corona crisis that asked, how should we actually distribute Corona vaccines between countries on the global scale if we didn't have to worry about market prices, deals with companies, and so on? So what would be an ethically justifiable distribution? And in a sense, that is a thought experiment, because that's of course not what the world looks like, but hopefully it's a thought experiment that can also guide action and maybe bring us a little bit closer to a world where ethics would matter more.
All right, so that's the final one I'm going to show right now. Again, I forget exactly when we got this from Lisa, but it would have been January, February, I think. And so far as I'm concerned, that was not an issue on the table. And it's one where, as a regular experimental scientist, you just can't do experiments on issues like that. But it's something where the idea of experiments is a useful way to come up with alternative tools for thinking. And even though I couldn't conceive of an experiment as a biologist to test the issues that Lisa raises, it's one that's obviously very important and has become more important over the last couple of months. There are a number of more videos, and I would be happy to show them, but I'm going to try to wrap up the videos for now and then move over to a point where we can open up discussion to other people. Let me just see what other things I have on the slides here. We solicited videos like this. Okay. Just to summarize some of the themes that have come up through our working group, lots of limitations concern resources. Some of the limitations that we have concern researchers as well, where the resources are always going to be difficult to obtain, but there may be some ways to share ideas and skills to get researchers to do experiments they couldn't do before. And especially with the limitations we've had over the last year or two, I think there are a number of cases where what GYA members in one discipline do, it might be hard for members in one discipline to understand the ways that people in other disciplines are approaching experiments. That more or less is what I came up with. I'm going to give a big thanks for the GYA for their support, Candida, who's done a great deal of organization for this group, the participants in this incubator, everyone who sent us videos, which as you saw, a number of them were very lovely, and everyone who was patient enough to take the surveys that we set up. Thank you very much. Okay, now the next slide I have is questions, but I'm going to try to zoom past that. Hooray for the applause. I'm going to try to move away from the questions I had right now. I've been talking for about 20 minutes now, and it occurs to me that there may either be questions or unstructured thoughts. So if anyone has questions or things that they'd like to discuss, let's take a couple of minutes to look at that. And if you guys don't have very much to discuss, then I'm going to warn you. I'm then going to go to the typo-ridden questions that I put on the panel that I'd set up.
Hello, may I ask a question?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just wondering that, are you going to have any plan to have the outreach activities regarding the experiments or not?
Is the question if we're planning to have more activities?
Outreach activities in the case of the experimental issue.
Oh yeah, so we're in the process of taking the replies that we got from GYA members and then trying to put that together into a single video. And then that could potentially be suitable for outreach. Other than that, our plan right now is to go dormant at least until there's another in-person AGM. And the reason for that is just that we really, I mean, I think that this group really needs to be able to sit with people in person to discuss the ideas further. And at that time, we could potentially do more outreach stuff as well. Is there outreach that you'd want to see coming out of this, given what we've seen so far?
No, because actually, I just wanted to know that, for example, as the young members of the GYA, I just wanted to know that if we have, for example, in future having the in-person meetings, is it possible to have such kind of experiments for public wherever we travel? Because I knew that there are some groups that they have such kind of equipments that they go from one city to another one to show the really simple experiments, but really exciting ones to the public. I just wanted to know that GYA has such kind of the plan to show that, okay, we as a scientist, also as experimentalists, we can also do simple experiments that they have a really you don't really need to know the background knowledge very well. But if we can explain, you will see that it's going to have a really deep effect, what we are doing. But it's a really simple version of what we have done.
Is that seems like a question that maybe other people on here might be better able to address? Anna, I saw you nodding a fair bit. Did you have things to add to that?
Yeah, I see Anna Maria is also unmuted, but yeah, I think it's a really great idea. And in terms, I think the original idea of the incubator started with an outreach kind of lens, because we really thought that we could approach high school students and kind of early higher education students on rethinking experiments outside their discipline. So I think that was our idea, and we kind of morphed with this video project. I think it can go back that way indeed if we have some more energy for the project. But I also know from other working groups like the art and science group, there are definitely some ideas of going out into the wild of in Japan, hopefully with students, or conducting kinds of experiments on site during the AGM. So I think if you're interested, that would be great to develop. But maybe Anna Maria, you know more too.
Thank you, Anna. I don't really know more. Just a reminder that the GYA members have in the past, when we had in-person meetings, gone out and met with various members of the public, school children. We had an outreach in Halle in 2019. And yeah, and as you say, Anna, that's always been part of quite a few working groups. I mean, the Young Scientist Ambassador Program group comes to mind, the Science Education group comes to mind. And indeed, for the future, if we hopefully will be able to meet in person next year in Japan, the Science Art group are already very, very busy preparing for Japan and some sorts of outreach. So yeah. I think it's going to be exciting.
Yeah, good. Okay, anyone else have anything to add? Yeah, is that Ashak?
Yes,
yeah.
Thanks. Just a note, I don't know how much this relates, but it occurs to me that one of the, I mean, this also goes to scientific excellence and all of that. Many of us love to explore different things with different paradigms of different researchers, but the pressures to succeed in a silo are basically there all the time for us in terms of establishing ourselves and things like that. And so even though there's huge calls for transdisciplinary research, collaboration, and seeing things from others' perspectives, it's still not rewarded in any way. In fact, it's punished in terms of productivity by the conventional systems. So there's something to think about here in terms of encouraging this behavior in young researchers, because I mean, I think it's fundamentally important to be able to do this, but it's worth thinking about the barriers, I think, because of that. I don't know if it's true everywhere, but it's certainly true here in South Africa.
Absolutely, and it. I won't say too much other than I agree that there are real problems. For me, I sort of do three disciplines. I do ecology mainly, with a little bit of evolution and a little bit of maths. Maths and ecology can be very challenging together because ecologists want to go out in the field and they don't want to learn about calculus, and vice versa. But ecology and evolution, there's this like century-long history of people developing a good idea in one discipline and then copying it to the other discipline. And so I mean, I definitely believe that there are cases where, under the right circumstances, learning about what one discipline has done well and transferring it to yours can be like beneficial. But there are many other cases where exactly what you describe happens, and like barriers come up, or research isn't recognized, and that's definitely part of why we wanted to chat about this.
Sorry, but just to add on that, maybe the big thing is that the philosophy of science has been taken out of a lot of fields that have reached kind of a certain level of maturity where it's just obvious to continue to do things, and maybe that's why there's a different sensitivity to these things in different fields depending on where you are. But yeah.
There are a
Jennifer?
couple of hands raised. Yensi has her hand raised, and then NC.
Hello, can you hear me?
Hello. Yeah.
Hi. I'm just wondering, it's very good information that you have collected, and I imagine that you will collect more information now with more members sending videos and filling the interview. My question is, at the end, when you have all this big information, you know, what will you aim to achieve with that? What are you going to do with this information in the best case scenario?
I think we have to think about two best case scenarios. So one is that we get a lot of information, but there are still serious logistical challenges with meeting in person next year. And in that case, I think trying to make a video that links together the ideas that we're getting, including stories like some of the ones that we've shown you, is sort of like a simple, digestible product that gives sort of a feeling of how people think about this. If, on the other hand, we're able to meet in person, then I think we can follow up this up more and you know, try to think about, like, synthesize what we're doing more than just a couple of the couple of bullet points that I've put here. That's sort of how I think about it. Anna, do you want to say anything more about that?
No, it's just about the impact that it will have, you know.
Yeah.
What impact would you expect this will have in how we think?
I guess my feeling is right now there would still be a lot to do, and it's hard in the current world to pull those pieces together really well. Like, I feel like I have a couple of really good stories, and then there's all these other things that I feel need to be explored to make, like, a really amazing product. I mean, yeah, that's sort of my feeling right now, and I've given you a taste of some of the cool things that have come out, but I think that, like, it would take more logistics to be able to do it. But that's my thought. Anna?
That's great, thank you.
No, I agree very much with you, Will, in terms of the practicalities. But I think, Yensi, to answer your question, I think the blue sky thinking is a bit related to Esha's point, is to maybe bring back some of the philosophy of science or the sociology of science back into the disciplines. So for us, the word critical was really important in critical experiments, because we wanted to think critically about why are we doing experiments, how are we doing them, what are the kind of what's shaping what an experiment is in different fields. So a blue sky idea was that we could start to think more critically about experiments across different fields. But we're really open. We really need some input to think about practical ways to make that impact. Be very welcome to ideas.
I see another hand raised.
Yeah, you mentioned about the lack of the equipment for experimentalists, that they always complain about that. That's something comes to my mind, that we know that at least in some developed countries, there are some labs and also equipments that they don't use it anymore because they are really old-fashioned ones, and also they just said that, okay, we have money, so we are going to buy really new technology ones. But that one could be really helpful, at least for the universities or even some schools in the developing countries, to just send them to them, and also saying, okay, like a gift, because if you are not going to use it, so we can send it to the other people. Does GYA has such kind of the plan, just to make a networks with the national young academies between the South and North, to really combine these experiments and also the equipments, to just transfer them and then send them?
I mean, Anna Maria might be able to talk on this more, or Jennifer, but to my knowledge, I don't think we have a plan like that.
Not specifically when it comes to actually exchanging equipment. I mean, we do have the Young Scientist Ambassador program, who have started also with the pandemic now to run virtual missions where they actually send lab equipment to each other, and then, you know, meet online and talk with their two teams in two different countries. And of course, the young academies also, they meet regularly, they exchange on you know, best practices, on challenges that they face. But to be honest, in the past, at least to my knowledge, that's been more about running the Young Academy, engaging with the public. What can we learn about how to do science advice? How to challenge the senior academies if they don't accept the existence of a Young Academy? All these things. It's been less about the actual concrete work that people do as a scientist. It's more on a, it's academies are on a next level, basically, to my understanding. They are not so much to do with the details of research. They are more about, exchanging, taking things forward, and engaging with the public also in a country.
Good. If that answers that, I see that Jonas had his hand up as well.
Yeah, and maybe I can interject a bit with like, I think the point that Enchi made is a bit takes for granted that you need like big equipment for experiments. Is one of those things maybe where actually, yeah, if we think about it critically and in a more transdisciplinary way, then maybe this is not necessarily the case, right? Certainly, it's often the case, or in certain fields, but nowadays you can run experiments where the only stuff you need is some code, right? Or not even, right? As we just heard in the video by Lisa, that there's experiments you can do kind of just with your mind, right? So I would I do like, however, that we seem to have like a shared vision in this virtual room to a large extent, that more transdisciplinary thinking and initiatives surrounding experiments would be a fruitful endeavor. I do agree with Ash and with Martin that there's a lot of hesitancy in the established fields and in the kind of the gatekeepers, specifically about journals. I think that funders, however, actually have already kind of changed quite a bit their tone. At least the discourse around this is, I think, it's pretty strong. And in many funding agencies, there's at least lip service, and not even real attempts to foster more transdisciplinary research, including experiments. I wonder a bit, like, what's the obstacle in the end? Why there's not much more kind of, let's say, real original and kind of cutting edge stuff coming out, apparently. Maybe it's to do with, in the end, the agencies need to rely on peer review, and then there's the same scientists as always with their established records of excellence that then evaluate. So it's to some extent it's ourselves, or like, let's say, our elders, that keep this from happening. Maybe this is part of the reason, but yeah, I'm glad that we're having these conversations here. Thanks.
I'm noting that just if I've got the session right, so there's 5 minutes more in this session, and then we have to finish up. So keep that in mind. If I understand right, we can go to the end of that 5 minutes, and in that case, the good discussion is great, and I'm just mentioning that there's 5 minutes. Yensi, did I see that you had another point you were going to raise?
I agree with Jonas, and I think it's very good, the part that you said of coding. I'm a biologist researcher, so a lot of the research has now moved to computer-based biology. But there's also a part where like you need like basic experiments, as Jonas mentioned, and sometimes in these countries, coming from Honduras, for example, a very underdeveloped country, even this basic equipment is not there, and so what Enchi mentioned, it's actually vital to start these research fields, but other than just like having the equipment and knowing that we can do a lot of experiments, in computer, is also about something that is very important in this group, that is how to do experiments and why we do experiments, like what can we do with experiments. So that's very important to kind of bring like these ideas of what can be achieved and what can we do with science. was more a comment, sorry. Hope it made sense.
Made sense to me. Yancy, can I ask, so Honduras is geographically a relatively small country. Does that pose additional complications for you? Like, I think about this a lot as in New Zealand, which is geographically big, but by population small and very isolated from the rest of the world. And I'm not sure how much that's true for people doing experiments in other places.
Well, we're geographically in like the middle of Central America, and we're very connected to the US, so we get a lot of influence,
yeah.
but it's kind of the poverty or like the lack of infrastructure in education that it limits a lot of things in there. And I would imagine in many other countries, you know, where like the education is basic and there's not really much investment in research from governments.
Yeah, thank you. You know, my theme of this has been mostly, I'd really like to pick all of your brains in person when we're both on about the same time zone. We've got a few minutes left, so I just thought I'd see if there are any other final thoughts that people would like to say before the session ends.
May I just add something regarding the experiments? Because since I'm a cosmologist, of course, I don't do the experiments, but because whatever I can just do is just sky observation. So if anybody is in this group is really interested in adding the sky observations as an experimental stuff, working with the telescopes and these things, I will be really happy to have such kind of at least outreach activities, because you know it's not easy to carry a big telescope from one place to another one. But at least we can have a small size one to do these activities.
Yeah. That ecology is not quite like that, but like you can't experimentally replicate New Zealand or a tropical rainforest. And yeah, no, that's a really important thing about some fields of research, that you get that sort of thing of experiments just are not sort of the part of the regular lexicon. Okay, there's 2 minutes left, which seems to me like I'm going to close the comments for this right now. It's lovely to hear from everyone here, and we'd be happy to chat with people in the future. Thank you all very much for coming to the session, and thanks to the people who I mentioned before who've helped this project along the way. I will call the session to a close, and then I forget if I'm allowed to stick around, but we'll attempt to stick around in the meantime. Bye, everyone.